welcome to yet another episode of What's Happening Now with Laura. Remember a few weeks ago, last month, the month before that, I told you that we will be having a recurring decimal every month on this show, and this week is no different. We have in studio with me my recurring decimal, Mr. Giles Romulus from Jeff SGP UNDP. And he has brought with him a crew of fantastic people who will be talking to us about something that is so vitally important to all of us. It's like the air we breathe. We've all heard the old adage, water is life. Yet, over 2 billion people suffer from water scarcity at least 1 month in every year. And over 1 billion people find it so very difficult to access clean drinking water. However, what are we doing in our individual parts of the world to ensure that our water supply is safe, uncontaminated, and conducive to our development? With me this evening, as I said earlier, is Mr. Giles Romulus, and he's brought with him a crew of people who will be talking about our watershed and water sustainability, development, and the like. Welcome, Mr. Romulus.
Laura, thank you again for being on your show. You have reduced me to a recurring decimal.
Yeah, recurring decimal.
That's all right.
It's not a reduction, just infinity
recurring.
times infinity. Yeah, we keep
Recurring
going and
decimal.
going and going.
Yeah,
And you really need no introduction, but just give us a brief.
Good evening, St. Lucia. Good evening, world. This evening, we are going to take you on a journey through one of St. Lucia's most important watersheds, the Soufriere watershed, called the Qualibu watershed, or the Qualibu caldera by pre-Columbian people. We're going to talk about integrated development, ridge-to-rift development. We are going to talk on the challenges facing that entire watershed, and we will also try to describe the unique attributes of this watershed. Towards the end of the program, we are looking at some of the project interventions we have in the watershed that are beginning to pay some dividends by intervening. You will see a number of persons here today. It just exemplifies the complexity of the Soufriere watershed and the fact that we need to work in partnerships to attain the goals of sustainable development. I want to start by perhaps giving a short description of the Soufriere watershed.
But before you go into the description of the watershed, let's just introduce our panel, and then we'll take it from there. With us is Miss Nadia Casabon. Nadia, could you tell us who you are and what organization you represent?
Okay, good evening, St. Lucia. My name is Nadia Casabon, as Laura said, and I represent an NGO in St. Lucia called Caribbean Sea. C stands for Student Environmental Alliance. We've been doing work in St. Lucia since 2004, and currently we have a project implementing underground in Soufriere.
Okay, and next to Nadia, we have Mr. Michael Bob.
Yeah, Michael Bob from the Soufriere Marine Management Association. And good evening, St. Lucia, and it's Creole Heritage Month. Bonsoir.
Bonsoir. Behind Mr. Bob, we have Dr. Camille David. Could you introduce yourself and tell us who you are?
Thank you, Laura. Good evening to St. Lucia. Camille David. I work for the CATS program as the marine expert. And the key focal area is in the Soufriere watershed, where we run a Ridge to Rift program with a number of key stakeholders. I'm very delighted to be here this evening.
Just break it down first and tell us what CATS represent, what CATS
Absolutely.
means.
This is the Caribbean Aquaterrestrial Solutions. And the project is jointly implemented by the German International Cooperation and the Caribbean Public Health Agency.
Beautiful. Next to Dr. David, we have Windia. Oh, we have Aretha. How could I? Aretha. Aretha Dasheville. Aretha, introduce yourself.
Yes, good evening, St. Lucia. My name is Aretha Dasheville, and I'm the National Project Coordinator for the IW Eco project. IW Eco means Integrating Water, Land, and Ecosystems Management in Caribbean Small Island Developing States. Like CATS, it's a Ridge to Rift project as well.
Beautiful. So we hear a little bit more about that. That sounds very interesting. And next to Aretha, we have Windia Jonai.
Good evening, St. Lucia. I am Windia Jonai, representing Frutage Jeunesse. It's an agro-processing business recently opened at the Sulphur Springs Park where we sell natural smoothies.
Wonderful. And a little later on, we'll hear how all of you tie into the watershed management and all of that good stuff. So now, Giles, you
Right,
take it
Laura.
away.
Yes. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Laura. Soufre, the importance of soufre dates back to historical times. In fact, when we started to do St. Lucia's first protected areas plan back in the late 1980s, early 1990s, and we started to do intensive mapping of the natural resources of St. Lucia, what you saw happening, in those days we had no computers, so we had to do everything by tracing paper. Imagine you had to cut off tracing paper and then put the natural resource on those tracing papers. And when you layered the tracing papers and put them, overlaid them, you realize the assemblage of natural and cultural attributes of soufre. And it was at that time, I recall very vividly, working for the National Trust at the time, we realized we had a precious part of St. Lucia that we could offer to the world as a World Heritage Site. And you might recall back in 2004, we got World Heritage status in the Peterhouse Management Area. If you look at Soufre from the hills of Fort Saint-Jacques, the scenic vistas from there, you have waterfalls, you have a diversity of ecosystems, you have tranquility, you have rivers flowing down to the Soufre Bay, you have species that are diverse, endemic to St. Lucia. The whole topography of Soufre is a volcanic topography. And one of the things that I perhaps should correct tonight is that the whole of Soufre is in a huge caldera. And some 12 to 29,000 years ago, there was this huge explosion that blew off the caldera and created that vast watershed we see the town of Soufre is located in. So, for example, when people, frequently in tourism, we see when people go to the Sulphur Springs, they are going into a driving volcano. But actually, geologically, once you start to ascend from Canaries, and you ascend all the way up to the top of Kachime, and then you descend into the crater, all of that is the northern rim of the caldera. Wow. And then you go right around to include the Peterhouse and so on. So Soufre, in fact, we have Soufre located in a caldera, which in itself is unique. And Soufre does not only have terrestrial beauty and diversity, but marine diversity as well. I also recall when we did studies on the marine side, for the first time we were able to do night dives. And our colleagues from the fisheries department were able to discover species that you don't see during the day, and so on. So Soufre is unique, it is diverse, it is beautiful, it has geological characteristics, but also diverse flora and fauna species, all of which need to be protected for present and future generations. Perhaps, Michael, you can add to that. I know you're from Soufre.
Yeah, for sure, in terms of the marine component, well, I must make it clear that with me before, I worked with forestry, so it's literally coming from the ridge to the reef, and being associated to the marine component for the past 3 years now, it's really a magnificent experience to dive in the area, and that's why you have all of these yachts coming from north, south, east, and west coming to Soufre, again to be perched under the pitons and to have that beautiful reef connection to dive from the north and to the south of the bay, and we have that beautiful fishing experience also, and we still have the traditional fish, which is seine fishing in Soufre. We have one of the deepest harbors in the area, so it's just a unique, beautiful landscape from ridge to reef.
Now, when I hear both you and Mr. Romulus talking about Soufre, I almost feel like I am not a St. Lucian. I almost feel like you're talking about a place that is foreign to me. I know Soufre is a beautiful place and all of that, and we've heard all of the cliche explanations of Soufre and descriptions of Soufre, but to hear it from that perspective, it's almost as if we're talking about someplace outside of St. Lucia. And it's almost as if Soufre has been given a bad rap, because a lot of people maybe 1 in every 3 St. Lucians will tell you, boy, I'm afraid of Soufriere. You know, what if what if the volcano becomes active and, you know, and Soufriere is just, I just need to get out of Soufriere in all of its beauty. How do you guys deal with that on a daily basis, especially coming from the SMMA?
I've lived all my life in Soufriere. I'm actually from Soufriere. And there is absolutely no fear. I mean, to wake up in the morning and to smell this beautiful aroma of air. I walk every morning except when it's not raining, and to hear the chirping of the birds, and it's just fantastic.
And there's never been any...
There's absolutely no fear. The only time I can recall Soufrierians having a fear is when there was this drilling in the pitons, in the sulfur springs for geothermal energy, and there was this loud hissing sound in the night, and people had the fear that it's going to erupt and that kind of stuff. But after people settle down, it's okay, it's all right. That's the best place in the world.
Exactly. At least 4 of you have mentioned from ridge to reef. For some of our viewers, just give us a brief explanation of what you mean when you say ridge to reef.
Okay, perhaps at this time we can put the map on the television screen. Perhaps Junior can put
map
the map
of St. Lucia.
Okay, great. This shows the red section of the map shows the watershed we are talking about. And for persons who don't know what a watershed is, it is really the hills or the highest points surrounding a main river, like the Soufriere River. You have the hills surrounding the entire area, and there's usually one major river in a watershed, and then the waters within that watershed all flow towards the sea, joining the main river that goes down to the sea. And then on the other side of the watershed, the water would flow in a different direction. So this area you see there on the television screen is what we call the Soufriere watershed. And when we go from the interior, perhaps you can go to the next map, we go from the interior, the extreme right of your screen, that is really the Fort Saint-Jacques area, and you go right down to the Soufriere Bay. All of that is the watershed area, and we have a beautiful map from the Forestry Department that shows you the different land uses, or is it vegetation uses there as well. The information is that this entire area is about 17.2 square kilometers, and we have a number of agencies working in that area, all to help protect that natural resource base. We have all come to the conclusion that if that resource is compromised in any way, it's going to affect our tourism, it's going to affect our fisheries, it's going to affect our GDP, it's going to affect our standard of living in St. Lucia, our quality of living. And that is why so many agencies are finding different methods, like the rich-to-rich method. Perhaps, Dr. Camille, perhaps you can expound on that a little bit more and talk about the implementation of the rich-to-rich strategy in St. Lucia.
Yeah, so before I even go into that, perhaps allow me to just shed a little more light on the watershed. As Giles indicated, it is an incredibly complex system. You have over geologic time frames, processes that regulate flow, drainage, and ultimately, once this is disturbed either through human activities or land clearing or the stress of climate change, it throws the whole process into some sort of disarray. And over time, the drainage is affected, and that could have serious implications for river morphology, the coastal communities, the fauna and the flora along the river banks, the stability, and so on and so forth. So that is very important. And on top of that, you have a number of human interactions and within the watershed, farming, agriculture. So all of this comes together, and that creates a very complex situation in terms of managing, and not to mention the receiving waters of the bay. So that,
okay, let me just pause you here, because this is a very dynamic and very fluid show, so I'm already getting messages, although our lines are not open. So one of the things that the viewers are asking, in a very simplistic way, break down for us what exactly is the watershed and why is it so important to us. So let's take it from that perspective and then move on to the other aspects. What exactly is, break it down in its most simple form.
Yeah, okay. Here we go.
Either one of you can take it.
I'll take it.
So watershed is the total area of land over which rainfall drains into creeks, into streams, into rivers, and ultimately flow out to the sea. So you're talking about an entire area. So over time, water flows on the surface, or surface runoff, or it infiltrates or percolates into the ground. And that really controls the release of water throughout the entire watershed and subsequently into the receiving waters of the bay.
One interesting way of looking at it as well, if you stand on the west coast with your back to the sea and in front of a river, let's say the Rosa River or the Canis River or the Soufrière River, you look to the right and you look for the highest ridges that are close to you and you follow it along with your eye. You see it goes eastward, then northwards, and then westward. So the mountain ridge within which is found a main river, that is like the drainage basin. Okay? So every watershed has high points that demarcates it. It's almost like nature's natural planning units. Because within that watershed, as Camille said, all the water within that flows in one direction towards the sea. So the watershed is defined in that way. You can actually look at it and stand anywhere, and in Castries, stand in Castries at the wharf or anywhere with your back to the sea, and you look at Mont Fortuné, the ridge of Mont Fortuné, going eastward, then northwards into places like Derfort, into places like Forestier, Bocage, and then it comes down into just north of Castries there. That is a watershed. And we have 27, I think, main watersheds in St. Lucia, the last study I saw. And Soufrière is one of the most important ones.
Okay, so why is Soufrière the most important out of all of the 27 you said?
Yes. So one of the most important ones because of the diversity of natural resources, because of the geology, because of the flora, because of the fauna, because of the warm waterfalls, because of the scenic vistas, because of its contribution to our economy, both from the fisheries, diving, and aesthetics of the area. The fact that we have a World Heritage Site there, which is a unique site of outstanding universal value. The fact that we have perhaps the only internationally recognized managed marine protected area in St. Lucia, which won an IUCN British Airways Award a number of years ago. So it's the world community has recognized Soufrière as being very important in the biodiversity of the world, actually.
And it's also the home of the St. Lucia parrot, which is our national bird.
Of course, of course.
Yes, yes.
So let's go a little bit into sustainable development. This is a word that we hear bandied about at every turn, especially on the political sphere. But what exactly does that mean to us individuals, and tie that into the watershed and how we can what's the importance of the watershed in terms of sustainable development?
Okay. Sustainable development is a very complicated term. People tend to define it as, the use of the resources now without compromising the use of the resources in the future. But once you start to look at sustainable development, you have to look at all the variables. The people, very important. People are important. They live in landscapes. You have to look at the flora, the fauna, the water, and you can even think of rivers and tributaries as the veins and the arteries of the landscape. We have to think of the impact of the terrestrial on the marine, because everything is integrated. Everything is integrated. And when we talk about sustainable development, ideally what it means is living in balance with nature, not adversely impacting the resource that you compromise its ability to be productive over time. So if you are doing that, you destroy your forest. You might have remembered the work done by Gabriel Charles and Robert DeVoe and these people. What they were telling us is, let us use it for our benefit now, but do not compromise our future generations' ability to use that resource. And that's why we talk about intergenerational equity. The fact that we should not do that, because if we push nature to a maximum, beyond that maximum, you're actually creating destruction. And then productivity of the environment begins to decline and everything starts to happen adversely. So sustainable development is about quality. It's about also quantity in terms of productivity, but it's about human beings living in harmony with nature as well.
Okay, so let's link that to the watershed and let's look at the challenges that Sufra faces with regard to sustainable development, with regard to the watershed. Um, Maybe Nadia, you want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Okay, so for within the watershed, there are lots of different activities taking place. So if we start in the hinterland, so if you go up towards Fonsejac, you have some farming taking place, you have residential areas in that area. You come down to town, you have some more businesses in that area. But Suffer is also what we consider the mecca of St. Lucia for tourism. So we have a lot of persons coming in here to enjoy or benefit from the natural scenery, the beauty of Sufre, and to maybe go to the Sulphur Springs. So in looking at sustainable development, we want to ensure that all residents, all business owners, all visitors have a chance or a share in enjoying and living in um, being one with nature in that sense, so that whatever that the farmer does doesn't negatively impact on what is happening down in the bay, or whatever that happens, let's say, and the sulfur springs doesn't impact on the farmer. So that sort of balance that you have to strike between the users and the environment, so that one user doesn't impact on the other, and everybody has to benefit from what is happening in Sufre.
I'm glad you mentioned the farmers because historically we know about farming and our poor farming practices in the past, and the fact that bananas, for instance, were always planted near the riverbeds, the riverbank. Sorry, we know that we use a lot of fertilizer, and we know that the fertilizer runs off into the rivers, and that has impacted our water sources. What has been done to mitigate against that, the poor farming practices, and how the water has been compromised, and what are we doing to fix that, and how that impacts the other players?
Okay, so Sufra was never a big banana production community. If you look at the farmers in Fonsejac, their focus, being the breadbasket of Sufra, was predominantly root crops like dasheen. And in Sufra, unfortunately, we have very steep slopes, and each farmer is looking for an area to plant. They go to where their family has property, and they will be planting dasheen on the steep slopes. With climate change, as Camille mentioned, we have seen a change in the dynamic, a change in the structure of the soil. We have seen that with heavy rainfall, with farming on the steep slopes, it has caused landslides. So farmers now have to, for their own interest, protect their topsoil, engage in farming practices that are going to help them continue their livelihoods. So to engage in practices that would encourage retention of the topsoil, so to go into something like terracing, or to plant more tree crops to hold the soil together. So Ministry of Agriculture has been doing several projects with farmers to try to get them to change their practices, and for their own interests, not just to reduce soil erosion.
Perhaps, Lauren, that's where we can bring in Aretha, because Aretha has a fantastic project that's beginning to deal with those kinds of negative impacts in the environment.
See, but before Aretha comes in, I just need to throw in the cultural practices, because you have, with farming, more specifically within the Sufre watershed, and Sonia alluded to it in terms of steep slopes. We do not have flat land. So from the time you leave the basin, you're up in the hills. So with root crops, in, like for example dasheen, when that's planted, you have to literally take off all the weeds within the area. So you literally expose the topsoil. And that's again just normal bad farming practices. But certain practices are culturally sound, but not necessarily the best.
Right.
One of the things too, you have during the dry season, you have shifting cultivation, and farmers normally burn. You slash and burn. And for them, that's the best thing to do, especially around the dry season, around the Easter season. You burn the area, and the land is left to fallow for a little while, and then you plant. That's not necessarily the best. So that's the way now you have to look at cultural practices vis-a-vis proper agricultural practices that has deteriorated the soil.
Would
So
you,
the Aretha
would you,
can
before we
take
go
from
to
there.
Aretha just pause a little bit.
That's fine.
Would you say that this is what contributed significantly to the almost complete annihilation of the Fosse Jacques area?
I wouldn't say complete because, as we said, we need to factor climate change. But because of the steep slopes, that's traditionally what has happened. That's how farmers in that area, that's livelihood for them. But again, as we say, it's not because it is culturally sound that means it's the best practices. But that's what it is. We have steep slopes, and over time that has happened. And so we have the continuous erosion of topsoil. Soil fertility is also going because once you have heavy rains, it slides down into the rivers and streams and ends up in the bay. So over time,
And
so
that
right
kills your
now-
rivers as well, because we have a lot of
yeah.
silting
Yes,
going
silting.
on.
So the aquatic life and the fish life in there is also compromised because of the soil that's actually sitting there. And added to that, the pesticides and chemicals and fertilizers being used in the soil ends up in the
the
waterway.
rivers,
So Aretha?
Yes, Aretha.
I could just make one.
Oh, Aretha, that's fine.
I mean, we have mentioned the disturbances, which, of course, as a result of human activity on the watershed. But with climate change, for example, you're going to have rainfall of lower intensity and frequency, which could trigger even greater soil movement, nutrient movements, and loading into the bay. And this is critical to understand because once these ecosystems are depressed by by the structure or the composition and the goods and services they provide, it creates a series of interlinked problems, which obviously is going to take a concerted effort of the many different players in the watershed to resolve. And this could take many years, in fact tens of years, before we can see improvements once an ecosystem becomes impaired.
Yes, Aretha.
So just to put IWECO in context, its genesis stemmed out of the recognition that Caribbean small island developing states are more directly affected than other parts of the globe. And therefore governments need to implement programs that can build resilient economies, resilient communities, resilient ecosystems.
Why are we more affected than other parts of the world?
Because of our small size. Yes, and we are vulnerable. We are more vulnerable. But so therefore, IWECO looks at a reach-to-reef approach, and I know some of my colleagues, but we need to say that whatever happens on the mountains, on the ridge, you throw a bottle, you throw a mattress in the river, it ultimately gets to the sea. So it will affect the ocean. And so on a local level, IWECO seeks to mitigate the poor biophysical conditions within the watershed, but it's even targeted to the upper Soufrière watershed, which is Fosse Jacques and environs. So in terms of our activities, we're looking at slope stabilization and rehabilitation. We're looking at awareness. This is really important because with regards to education, you have education, then you have changing attitudes, and with changing attitudes, hopefully changing behavior. We have capacity building component that where we will train not only the farmers, but the extension officers and the forest officers. We also have a component on sustainable livelihoods, because it's important. We cannot just tell farmers, don't plant the dasheen on the slopes. We have to give them alternatives, because at the end of it, it's a bread and butter issue, right? I can go more in terms of what we've done so far, because there are a lot of exciting things happening on
Yes,
IWECO.
I want you to go into it, but I'm very keen, as you know, when it comes to the farmers and the fishers and the small people that we don't necessarily think about every day, but are so integral into us office people, like, you know, we say, being surviving and existing, because they're the ones who provide the food, right? What are the measures already implemented for the farmers? So Mr. Bob said earlier, you know, the historic way of farming is not necessarily the best way of farming. It may be historically sound, it may be culturally sound, but it's not necessarily the best. So what are we teaching them? What have we done to ensure that, okay, we said this is not good? What are they supposed to be doing? And have they accepted, embraced, and begun implementing and what has been the feedback from
Sure.
that?
Maybe I think my colleagues at forestry would be happy for me to note this. Way back, it was conservation, like staying out of the forest. But now the paradigm has shifted. There's a paradigm shift in terms of getting people involved, not just conservation, but making a livelihood out of it. And you find with that strategy, the community would embrace those projects and those interventions even better. So for example, with Foster Jacques, right now, it's highly participatory. From the onset, we have gone into the community. In fact, in June, we had a meeting with over 70 farmers, and they were quite keen on the project. We haven't trained them as yet, but we're in the planning stage. So for example, what we've actually done assessment of over 55, maybe over 60 farms. We're now in the process of doing customized restoration plans for those farmers. Then the next step is to go back to them, each of those farmers, speak with them with regards to, okay, what they want to plant, because remember, it's not just the dash-in, but also crops of high economic value. We need to also look at the market viability. And we also have to look at in terms of the technical, for example, what the forest officers would advise, because even if you may want dash-in, but dash-in is not good for the soil. So we would probably recommend intercropping, agroforestry, etc.
And from your experience with having these conversations, the farmers there is buy-in?
There is buy-in. In fact, we're just about to go back to them, and we've just developed some kind of MOU. It's not legally binding. It's like a gentleman's agreement. But you know what? We're going to provide you with all the plans. We're going to provide you with the labor. We're going to assist you in maintaining your farm. However, you should not cut down the trees without probably forestry's permission. So we're in that process of engaging them, going back to them and saying, this is what we propose, what do you think? Because in the past, maybe we would have gone, planted, and then they would and then they would cut it down. We've had instances of that. So we're trying to get a different approach right now.
Okay, so the skin in the game.
Okay, so for Caribbean Sea's end, we have a project with Jeff Small Grants where we are targeting 2 farmers in the Dewash area and encouraging them to transition from chemical-based farming to more organic farming, which is how we used to farm way back in the 50s and 60s before all these chemical fertilizers came into existence and were being imported. So for our farmers, the 2 farmers that we have targeted, they're interested. In fact, one of them is transitioning his entire farm to organic farming. He has recognized that even when they plant dash-in, the size of the dash-in is getting smaller. So they're realizing that there's a loss of fertility in the soil, and there's a need to...
That's from the fertilizers, like planting with fertilizers?
Planting with fertilizers, but continuous use. So you're basically
right.
planting dash-ins on every year on a rotating cycle.
So there's no rotation.
It's exactly. It's
depleting
the minerals and the the nutrients that are available in the soil.
That's necessary for the dash-in, but not necessarily all of the nutrients and minerals in the soil.
Right. So for this one specific farmer, he also has a nature trail on his farm. So he wants to do a farm-to-table experience.
Right.
So to do the farm-to-table experience, he has to go all organic. So he is transitioning gradually over the next 2 years to all organic farming. He is also interested in planting more long-term crops. But what the farmers are asking is, if we're going to stop our short-term high productivity crops, we want a market that we can sell our produce to. So that is one of the things that we are doing at Caribbean Sea, is to find markets for them for their produce. So if they're, for instance, going to be planting maybe citrus, we have citrus that's just falling down the ground in Soufrière. But you have companies like maybe Pine Hill right next door in Barbados that is looking to purchase citrus. So if we can get those linkages created, then we can get a export market. We have a up-and-coming young company, where they're making smoothies. I mean, we should be producing our own juices in St. Lucia instead of having to import juice from other countries.
Now, something you said that struck me. You said going all organic. So they're changing they're interested in changing the farming practices from the chemical fertilizers and whatnot into organic farming. But the produce that the output, can that now be branded organic, or is there supposed to be a period of time where the soil now regenerates and rejuvenates itself before the output from that soil can be termed or branded organic?
You're correct. So for something to be certified as organic, there is lots of red tape to go through. Unfortunately, because of the size of St. Lucia, we do not have areas where we can designate as organic. All the farmers would have to join in. So if your neighbor who is less than a mile away from you is not organic, you cannot label your produce as organic, but you can label your produce as organically farmed. So I have been in contact with some persons at Massey, and they express interest if they can certify that the farmer use only organic practices, that they can sell with packaging that says organically produced.
So therefore, there is a need for marketing for the farmers in that area, because I think a lot of people are confused when you hear organic, when a product is labeled organic. They think as long as you farm organic, then the produce from that farming is automatically organic produce, but that's not so. So there is a very serious need for marketing of not just the market where we can sell the produce to, but how we market it to those markets. Yeah.
Yes.
There is one key thing we must not forget in the line of production is the time level for the maturity of whatever crop. And also, we need to put into consideration the population growth. We have to feed more mouths. The population in St. Lucia right now is what, about 175,000. Back 20 years ago, it was not that number. So in terms of producing dashing with good soil fertility, it would take you about 8 months to have a good crop. Now you have more mouths to feed, so we need that turnover much faster. Hence the reason we have more fertilizer. So you need it to grow faster, so you can have the crop and so you can produce. So these are one of the things we need to also remember. We need more food, we need more mouths to feed, so the farmers now have to put more stuff for it to grow faster, and that is also creating a problem.
Now,
so that's what we must not forget. That.
Yes. Now that opens another type of discussion completely, because now we're talking about crop rotation, because the faster it grows, the more impact it has on the nutrients and minerals in the soil. So you need crop rotation. How big are those farms? Can you have designated areas where you have crop rotation? But also there is also the talk about moving from primary producers to secondary producers. So now we're talking about kids, they love their chips and stuff, so we use a lot of potato chips and we use a lot of those imported snacks. We're talking about moving into manufacturing our own chips. I mean, I think there's a brand now, Saldanas, and the Saldanzas, and they have dashing chips and plantain chips and sweet potato chips and whatnot. Now we're talking about moving into that direction, because that economically makes more sense than just planting the dashing, harvesting it and selling it as a dashing tuber.
Okay, Laura, I think perhaps we can all move to Frutagenes now to tell us a little bit about the agro-processing that they're developing.
But before we go on to that,
there's also a company in Fort Jacques doing those kinds of things you're talking about. The chips, what's the name of the company? Rainforest Foods.
Right, and so that puts more, and it puts more impact,
added value.
Right, more value added, but at the same time, like Mr. Bob was saying, it also, there's more stress, because now you need not just food for the primary source for your primary market, but you need that produce to now produce to supply for the manufacturers of the chips and whatnot, because that's another market altogether.
No, but recognizing the demand from growing population, one of the things we are looking at is more intensive forms of farming. We had aquaponics here. We have other methods of cultivation. We are going into greenhouses using ICT methods. We're going to have that as a program perhaps in the future. We have to find ways that we can increase, augment our production without destroying the environment. You see, the truism of what Michael is saying brings another reality to the table. Because if you're going to use more pesticides, more fertilizers, and at the same time cancer rates are increasing in St. Lucia, what is the connection of cancer and mortality and morbidity to the increased use of pesticides and fertilizers? We know that there is some causation there. We don't know. We hear about Martinique and the impact of all kinds of chemicals on the banana industry and the increase in prostate cancer, Martinique being having the highest rate of prostate cancer per 100,000 head of population in the world. So we have to begin to balance that. And one of the things we do is think in silos. We think, okay, production, yes. 20% increase of production here. But nobody tells you how many people get cancer and has to go to La Mena or La Clarac Hospital in Martinique and pay huge amount of their money just to get treatment, and they may not even survive at the end. So the preventative aspect, the health-wellness connection with the environment is an important element that we have left out of the discourse. And that is why we're talking about integrated development now. Let us not forget about those important variables. Health, yes, food, but what is the quality of food, and so on. And that's why perhaps we go to the organic smoothies now.
We'll come back to organic food. We're due for a break. So when we come back from the break, we will get to Fritage Jeunesse. But one of the things I wanted to ask, what are the sizes of those farms?
Yeah, so we conducted actually a baseline survey to start the phase 2 of the CATS program within the watershed. And on average, the size of the holdings, about 1.3 hectares, is a very small fragmented farms where you have farmers cultivating on very steep slopes. Obviously, that is a concern, and in fact, one of the very important point in the survey is that there's a general low levels of awareness in terms of reach-to-reef concept, and within the whole farming process and activities within the watershed. So we need to create a level of awareness where we can get people to understand the implications of these kinds of activity on the sustainability of ecosystem, the functions and the goods and services that they provide, to ensure that we can come up with programs as multiple agencies to address all of these with a concerted effort.
Okay, great. We're due for a break, but when we come back, we will head on to Fritage Jeunesse and look at how we have cottaged our way from primary production to secondary production. See you on the other side of the break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and thank you for staying tuned to what's happening now with Laura. It's been a very, very informative session previous to the break, and let me just tell you, I am learning things and I'm hearing things that you just take for granted and you don't really think about it individually. And I'm thinking, I dare say, Giles, at some point we may have to bring each of the panelists individually to talk about their own area of expertise or their own special area. Before the break, we spoke about Fritage Jeunesse, an entrepreneur, a small company that's dealing with taking our produce from its primary stage and transposing that into something that we use all the time. We have drinks. We always want to drink. We never want to drink water. We always want that added value, this added thing to our water intake. And Fritage Jeunesse has thought, why not? We're importing all of these juices and we're importing all of these drinks and we're importing all of our fruits. When we have fruits in St. Lucia, that's just going to waste. So tell us a little bit about your guys, what you do, how you came about. And I'm actually looking forward to this segment and a little bit later on because we get a chance to sample the goodies. And I hope it's as good as Giles says it is.
Yes, it is.
So tell us a little bit about you guys, the genesis of you, how you started, why you started, and what you're doing and where you're operating from.
Okay, so as you know, Soufrière is known for its abundance of fruits. However, when you drive around, you notice that mangoes are just laying on the ground. papaya, pineapples, they're just rotting. So in 2014, a group of young persons, young farmers, entrepreneurs, and extension officers, we decided that we need to change. We need to find a solution to this problem. So we came together, and after much deliberation, we decided on starting an agro-processing business. Initially, it would have just been a small business where we would pulp the fruits and sell it to other businesses, example supermarkets. However, we wanted to go big, so we started with Cariled. It's a Canadian group. At first, Mr. Finicia, he was the one heading that group. So we had a lot of meetings with him, and they decided to assist us. And later on, we met with Jeff. So these are the two main organizations who assisted us. Currently, we are at the Sulphur Springs Park, where we sell only natural smoothies, especially fruits which are being wasted.
And all the fruits that you use are locally produced and not store-bought.
Only berries for now, but all the other fruits, they are locally produced.
And there's no added sugar?
No.
All just fructose? Just
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm a sugar junkie, and so I'm asking. so right about now, you said that, I'm like, that thing not that thing not gonna taste good to me. So, but yeah, continue.
Our main objective, was to create employment, especially for young persons, and to create a healthy product for visitors and for health conscious persons. So it was a smart choice to open a business at the Sulphur Springs Park, because that is where most visitors come to. Our drink list, it's linked to the Sulphur Springs, so you find drinks named after Gabriel. He fell into one of the craters and he survived. The Bachelor, one of the series, it was held at the Sulphur Springs. We have the Qualibu. We have Springs Delight. We have one called the Sulphur Blast. And if you know what blast means, you know that it is very hot and peppery. So we have a range of smoothies. We have detox. We range from detox smoothies, unsweetened to sweetened smoothies. It is very tasty, like Mr. Romulus mentioned.
It is.
He sold it. So,
It is.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. But what's interesting to me, to backtrack a little bit, they said young farmers. So all of the people involved in this company farmed at one point, or continue to farm?
Continue to farm.
And
so,
what do you farm?
Fruits, so pineapples, papaya, all the fruits that we use, we get it from young farmers. So
Let's put it in perspective. What are you, a farmer?
no, I'm not a farmer.
Okay. I'm just trying to get to
No.
understand. So you buy the fruits from the
From
farmers.
young
Okay.
farmers,
All
yes.
right. So there's a chain here. So I'm seeing. I'm
Yes.
right.
So we're creating employment directly. We currently have 3 employees, and we are also creating employment indirectly, where we buy from those young farmers within Soufrière Choiseul area.
Now, here's a lesson there, Laura, that we are trying to create the backward linkage and the forward linkage. Now, we have challenged Frutage Jeunesse not to stop there. They have one retail outlet in the Sulphur Springs. The district rep has offered them a second one in Soufrière Town, and we are challenging them to come to Castries. Because if 60% of the population is between Ancillary and Grosley, why not have some kind of outlet in Castries? And if it grows and grows, perhaps we can start a package to sell.
And
We
of
have
course-
to. One of the problems the banana period taught us is that we got stuck in neutral.
Right.
We were primary producers all the time, and the added value was not coming through. Here's a potential example that will go from the soil all the way to the market, to the table, and beyond, with possibilities. And the fact that young ladies have taken up that initiative and to adopt entrepreneurial strategies to move forward. It is small, but it is growing. But Microsoft was small. Yeah? Michael Dell was small. Where's Dell Computers now?
There you go.
Right. So the impatience of growth, we have to understand that we have to start small and we have to grow, nurture, mentor, give our young people the opportunity to grow. Let us discover the genius of our people, because that is what I'm discovering since I came back to St. Lucia. Give them an opportunity, challenge them, give them the financial resources and the mentoring, and let them fly. And very soon we are going to begin to see the results. 3 persons employed, full-time. I don't want to ask you what the salaries are, but I'm sure they're quite good. And imagine a second retail outlet very soon, a third one possibly in Castries, and who knows what can happen. And that is where we're going with the aquaponics and other such projects of this kind. So I want St. Lucia to understand that. We are not going to get stuck in neutral again. We're going to see if we can go from the soil to the table and beyond.
Now, Wendia, the farmers that you engage, the farmers that you buy from, are they farming organically? Or
Well-
are we still, no, it's important,
question,
because I
yeah.
think
Yes.
eventually that, because we're moving in a direction right now where everybody's health conscious. Like, you may be not embodying health conscious lifestyle, but it's in your mind. I think everybody, we see it every day in the number of persons that we see walking, in the number of people that we hear talking about cancers and carcinogenics, carcinogens and all of those things. So are the farmers organically farming, or are they still chemically farming?
Well, we have 2 farmers for sure. They are organic farmers, but as Ms. Casabo, as she explained what the difference, I can say that 2 are organic and 2 of them are organically farmed.
Okay.
Yes. So
Right,
but we
because
try
that
as
adds
much-
value to your product as well, when you can say your product is organic,
Yes.
right?
It is. We also use biodegradable cups and straws because we were very concerned about.
Our landfills.
Yes. So all our items are biodegradable, and yes.
There's another interesting development in the Sufra area again. We are trying to test a concept, a model called agritourism park or development. Most practice in Eastern Europe and parts of South America, where we can look at the integrated development of the area. So we go from sustainable agriculture to gastronomy, to look at the heritage tourism of the area, and to look at the other benefits that you can derive from that area. So people can come to those spots to have an experience that can help them revive or themselves from the stresses of urban areas. We currently have a study being done by Elizabeth Charles Suma with the Forest Shack Development Committee to look at the possible boundary for an agritourism park. Now, when we talk about park, people usually conjure the thoughts of no development. No, that's not it. It is to identify the area where we can work with IWECO and GIZ to transition that area to more sustainable organic farming over time, to introduce new income streams and employment opportunities, but very importantly, to give the farmers the assurance that what they produce will be sold. In fact, we're trying to connect the hinterland to the coastline. There are so many top hotels in Sufra. We're very soon going to have to approach them and say, look, if we're going to have that resource sustained over time, we have to create the linkage, and what the farmers produce have to be bought, so that the farmers can realize a sustained livelihood over time. So the tourism hinterland link, the coastal hinterland link is very, very important. So as the program develops and we understand the integrated elements associated with agrotourism and agrotourism landscape, we are going to begin to see, I think, more benefits, more initiatives like Frutage Jeunesse, and of course, very important to what we do is continued monitoring of water quality and the research that is involved in telling us how well we are doing or how bad we are doing over time. So that's very, very important, and that's where GIZ has a very important role to play in the kind of work we do.
Now, one of the things you said that resonated with me, you said you were trying to get the hotels, especially in the Sufra area, to buy what the farmers are producing. How competitive are our produce? Because, you know, it's business.
Yes.
Everything is weighs down to the bottom line, economics of it all. How competitive are we? Because every penny counts. So the hotels are going to think, okay, fine,
Yes.
I'm going to buy your product, but how am I going? How do we match up to get against the imports?
Well, you see, if you only look into the short term, you can buy very cheap produce that are loaded with pesticides. But a number of those tourism have gotten, hotels have gotten Green Globe certification, and then linking them to production that is moving towards organic is to their benefit.
Right.
They can put it on their website. They can boast about it internationally. You have some of the results, some of the best results in the world are in software. And if they're going to see they're helping to protect the marine environment, one strategy is linking up with the hinterland, the communities in the hinterland that are trying to survive and are trying at the same time to protect the resource. So we're going to make those kinds of arguments to them.
And that increases their premium as well.
That
Yes,
too.
definitely.
As the natural resources are better managed, and we can say that the water quality is improving, we can say that the food is of a high quality, moving towards organic, fully organic over time, we can boast and we can say we have a truly world universal asset in software that we can sell to the world.
Great. Now, Nadia, not Nadia, Wendia,
India.
I'm going to come back to you a little bit again because, whoa, I heard some names there. And what exactly you have, because St. Lucia, we're going to be trying Wendia's Fritage Jeunesse's product live. And as you know, I have a very expressive face. So everything that I'm tasting, you will see it on my face and you will tell whether I'm faking it or, I'm enjoying it. Tell us what you have in store for us.
Okay, so tonight we are only making 2 of our smoothies, which are the Gabriel's Delight and the Springs Delight.
Tell us what's in the Gabriel's Delight. You don't want to tell us?
No, we cannot say that.
Okay. she's-
Intellectual property.
but I think, but it's all jokes aside though,
Yes.
it's important that people know what's in it because some people may be, like one of
Yes,
my
but
best
we-
friends is allergic to pineapple.
Yes, but also before we sell the smoothies, we ask the visitors, are you allergic to any fruits? And they could always substitute. So with the Gabriel's Delight, we have banana, pineapple, and berries, and grenadine. So if you're allergic to pineapple, I know that most persons are, you could always add something else like papaya or soursop. So yes, but with the Springs Delight, it's more it's sourish, so you have lemon, mango.
Okay, so more citrusy.
And, yes, and punch in there.
Right. So I
Yes.
can deal with that.
And let me just market our Molten Rock. This one is an alcoholic smoothie.
That's your thing, right?
There's no alcohol in there.
Will the studio allow me? I'll have to take a trip down to Super
Yes,
to
yes.
try. But then I'll be driving, so that makes it even worse. But
Designated driver.
we'll figure something out. That's more like up my alley. Although I'm supposed to stay off the alcohol, but once in a while.
Yes.
Who's counting?
So
Who's
in-
watching?
So in the Molten Rock, we have soursop, guava, and piton. Again, a lot of visitors, they come to Soufriere to drink the piton
yes.
under the piton.
See the mountain,
yes.
drink the beer.
Yes. So
Right.
this one is a great.
So it's been it's
It's moving.
moving.
Yes. Yes. So,
All right. So let's try that. And as our smoothies are being prepared, Nadia, I'm so bad with names, but I have to pat myself
Yes, you're
on
doing
the
good.
back for tonight. I'm getting the names straight. Nadia, you have a way of testing our waters, because a lot of the times people don't drink tap water anymore. We don't drink tap water. We say water sources are all contaminated, and I know one particular viewer tonight who's always talking about how contaminated our water is. And if we're having all this, we're talking about tourism, we're talking about our watersheds, we're talking about preserving our water and all of that. How safe is our water? And
So you had to differentiate. Let's be
Yes.
careful. Let's be very careful. Our
absolutely.
Wasco water
Yes,
is very
good. Yes, but we're talking
Let's be
about
very-
source. We're talking about source.
Yeah, we're talking about the coastal marine environments and so on,
yes.
and river water.
Yes.
And so on. So Nadia.
Okay, so I have tested our Wasco water and it passed. It's good. Our Wasco water is good. But for Caribbean Sea, we have been doing testing of seawater and recently spring water. So Caribbean Sea has an environmental club with 5 schools, and I did water testing with all 5 of them. And in the Foster Jacques area, we decided to ask the students to bring in whatever water samples that they had at home. So water from the tap, rainwater, water from a spring, water from the river. And we tested it. And quite a few students came with spring water. And I realized the students was able to see it, that a lot of the spring water that we tested had bacteria growing in it. The test that we use is something that you can purchase online. It costs about $2.50 for one test kit, and you will see a photo of that
US,
in a
right?
while. That's US.
Okay.
And it's approved in the United States by the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. For homeowners, they can test, if you have a well at your home or a spring at your home, you can test your water if you suspect something is wrong with it. It's like your first line of testing. It's pretty accurate, but if you want to get more definitive results, then you would take those tests to a lab. So for us in St. Lucia, for our program, we would test the water with our test kit, and then for our program that we have, the project with Jeff, then we send the samples to CAFA for further testing. What we have found out is that quite a bit of the springs had fecal contamination, and we did some further testing and found that
We're talking about animals.
So mammals. So it could be that the spring was not tapped properly. So when you have a spring,
And you're talking about, when you say spring, you're talking about where people use the water for household
Yes.
purposes and not water that has been treated?
yes,
Water that has been treated?
No,
Or untreated
household,
water
untreated.
that we use around the house?
yeah. So some person would be using spring water. So what we realize is that for some of the springs, for instance, they're not tapped properly. Once the water is allowed to run on the ground, on the soil would have some latent bacteria in there.
So, okay, so that's what you mean when you say tapped.
Yes. So for the spring to be tapped properly, the pipe has to be inserted far into the ground, and then it allows water to flow through before it has time run on any soil. So it has to be in contact with the rock. So we're doing that. Part of our project includes trying to properly box one of the springs and then to provide water in the Wavincler community for persons to have access to for their homes.
So in the Wavincler community, there's no potable water?
There is Wasco water, but the majority of the houses in that area also use spring water. What alarmed me, in fact, is that when we did the water testing for the springs, we got some traces of some chemicals which are pesticide and fertilizer residues, some organophosphates, and that raised an antenna for us.
So, Jazz, maybe we'll have to engage one of your other projects. Tweak it a little bit. It's a desalinator, but we could tweak it a little bit to, because we have the
technology.
Right. We have the technology to remove the bacteria and the impurities and all of that. So maybe, we can work something out there. Yeah. Jalabo, I just like that. I have to plug in our people at every point, because I don't know if you guys know, but we have exported our innovation. So
you jumped, but I'm already in contact with Mr. Noel.
Oh, very well, very good. So you have to link, and that's what Jeff is all about.
Yes.
Creating the linkages backward and forward and laterally and
internationally.
There you go.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you've tested some water and we have some results?
Yes. So I don't know if
so let's see, we should have
Julia?
to bring up on screen.
So I did a test of
Go ahead.
should I say what? Okay, so unfortunately in transporting it sort of slid down.
But we can see what's there.
Yeah, so I did a water test and you can see in the gel is filled with nutrients, so it allows any bacteria that's in the water to grow. So all the pink spots you
That
see
looks
there,
like measles.
that's not measles. All the pink spots you
Bacterial
see
colonies.
there are fecal coliform bacteria that have grew and formed a colony. So it allows you to count. It's a visual test that allows you to count all the colonies, and you can see whether it meets any
And
standards.
that is water that we're using in our homes. Not in
No.
our homes.
This one was
but-
not a water
okay.
sample from home. No. No, I told you I tested our Wasco water.
No.
Very good.
I don't mean
Very good.
Wasco water. I mean like water, spring water. Like say for instance, is a spring water that certain households are using. Is that what it is?
No.
Oh no, this one is not. Okay, thank God.
It's
This
from the
one is
coastal zone, right?
Coastal zone.
Yes.
Oh,
it's from the
okay.
coastal
Oh,
zone.
but then that's another.
That's another realm of challenges, yes.
Yes,
Can
so
do.
that test that we do, it gives you a first snapshot as to whether there's any issues. Once it goes past a certain number, then we would recommend that persons go to CAFA for further testing to get definitive results.
Now,
Nobody needs to tell me this. So
now, Laura, this test kit, guess how much it costs?
well, she was saying $2.50.
Right,
US.
$250 US. So almost anybody can buy that at where? At a
Online.
drugstore, pharmacy,
Online
and test it. So
and test.
you're
Yeah.
traveling, you can put that in your bag and over 24-hour period, 48-hour
Yes.
period, do those
Yes.
tests. So the world is becoming
A smaller
a
place.
smaller place as well.
So what we have for the students, that's something that we do with the students. They get to learn that clear water doesn't mean clean water.
Your eyes can be deceiving.
So you
Yes,
can
yes.
see certain things, you can see if there's any sediment, but you cannot see if there's any bacteria. Sometimes you can smell if there are chemicals, but you cannot necessarily tell if the chemical has no smell, if it's in a small amount. So with our test kit, you basically get a gel in that bottle that comes frozen when you're ready to test it. It's defrosted, and then you measure using the pipette. You measure how much water sample that you're going to use, sometimes about 5 milliliters to 1 milliliter. You put it in the bottle, shake it gently, you pour it into the petri dish that comes with the test kit, and then it solidifies after about 30 minutes, and you let it grow for between 24 to 48 hours, and then you get to see what is in the water, if it has any bacteria in there.
Yes, Laura, you look stunned.
I
Laura,
don't want
it's not even breathing.
I don't want to
Okay.
be the devil's advocate
We never thought you were devil.
in this. But if this is stream water, and we had a very good description of what the watershed is, and the watershed we has a main river, and you have streams feeding into this main river, is it clear to see that what we're seeing there has the possibility of entering the ocean? As the manager for the SMME,
You're worried, right?
we're talking about reefs, diving, snorkeling, which goes for high prices, and we just said we have very expensive hotels with very high-priced persons coming in there. Is that something that I should be concerned about as it relates to water quality for the marine environment?
let the expert on that field, maybe Dr. David can respond to that. But just as he's formulating his answer, let me just say the lines are opened and we can start calling for 519-788, or you can send us your WhatsApp messages on 284-6536. Yes, 284-6536, or you can send us your emails at laurajepi@gmail.com. While Dr. David is giving us his answer, after his answer, we'll go for a quick break because we want those smoothies. I want to try these smoothies because I heard a few things and I think I need to wash that down. I need to wash that down with some citrus. So, we'll take Dr. David's answer. We will set up our smoothie station and we will take your calls, your questions.
Yeah, so if we go back to to the beginning, I think we missed a very important element, which is the ridge to reef concept.
Yes.
And in fact, I'm glad that was brought up. And in fact, the linkages that we saw with the Fruta Jeunesse, where a lot of connections between the producers, the agro-processors, and the market end, creates for a lot of interconnections and within the watershed. And that's what our program, the CATS program, together with Jeff, try to promote. So coming back to the watershed issue, we have to understand a lot of watershed-related processes and how nutrients, how pesticides, eventually from the land, gets into our waterways and down to the marine environment. And these are very complex processes, but drainage, either through surface flows, when it rains heavily, the topsoil, which obviously has a lot of nutrients, organic matter, would eventually be transported within the watercourses, as well as over time, you have different kinds of pesticides, some of which can be very persistent. In fact, in the case of Martinique, they could remain in the soil bound to clay particles for hundreds of years. And they will remain there, obviously, over time. And repeated exposures, even in small quantities, could have serious implications for the health of not only humans, but of the ecosystem in general. So these are kinds of very complex issues that we need to understand. So eventually, a lot of these inorganic particles, these fecal these organic components will eventually get into the waterways, and that will go into the receiving waters of the bay. And they would be.
And we're bathing in that. I mean, I think I need to bathe in the citrus now. No, I'm serious. We're bathing in that. Our children are bathing in that. We have incidents of illnesses that we never saw before manifesting. So.
Yeah, and that's why, coming back to the rich to reef concept, how do we address these kinds of issues? We cannot
That's the point.
have any isolated strategy to deal with that. In other words, Mr. Bob in the receiving waters of the bay can do very little to improve the receiving waters that he gets from the watershed. So it has to start way up in the watershed.
And this is where Aretha is
And that's where
Yes.
Aretha is very important.
Right,
And that's
so
why
Aretha,
Yes.
step on it.
And we are.
Step on it, you know.
Yes.
We need you guys to complete that. And more I'm seeing the importance of what you're doing. But, you know, it's a catch-22. You can't move too fast and cram things down the farmers or the end users' throats. There's got to be some skin in the game. There's got to be some buy into that. Let's quickly take a quick break, and then 2 minutes set up for our smoothies, because I really need that citrus smoothie. You just don't know. And then we will take your calls. Welcome back, and thank you for staying tuned to What's Up Now with Laura. And this is the part I've been waiting for all evening, where we're going to be sampling Fruitage Jeunesse product. And before we went on break, what Nadia told us about the bacteria, I feel like I'm just a big bacteria right now, and I just need to wash off. So, ladies, take it away. Tell us what you're preparing for us, and let's try them. Okay. In the meantime, while they're preparing, you can give us a call and let us know your feedback on what we've talked about today.
Good night, St. Lucia. Good night, viewers. My name is Krishna St. Bryce, and I'm one of the founding members of Fruitage Jeunesse. Tonight, I'm going to be preparing 2 of our signature smoothies. The very first one is the Springs Delight. Mango.
Okay, so what we have here, that looks like mango. I'm guessing what we have here. We have some mango, and that looks like lemon juice.
Grenadine.
Ooh, grenadine syrup. And we have some ice in there, so with, you know,
passion fruit.
Ooh, nice. Now, you know, that's actually my favorite fruit. And my mom would love this.
And a little water.
My mom would love this. Right. That already looks yum, people. It already looks yum. Do we have a call in the hair call coming through? No?
More mango?
I know. I can't wait.
So, Laura, hope you enjoy.
Thank
Springs
you.
Delight.
I think we should present it.
Biodegradable?
Yeah.
Biodegradable
cups, yes.
Oh, these cups are biodegradable?
Yes, they are.
Get out.
Yes.
Look at that. Biodegradable. That looks just like regular plastic.
Good.
Hope you enjoy.
Thank you. Let's try that here.
Bon appetit.
Mm.
What is it missing?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Let's look at her
Absolutely
face.
nothing. No, absolutely nothing. And I'm there's no sugar in there. Like there's no I thought I'd be missing the sugar. I'm salivating. I'm salivating. Do we have a call? No? We're losing the call?
This is good. This is good.
This is awesome.
This is great.
This is awesome. So we're trying now the second,
The Gabriel's Delight.
the Gabriel's Delight. And Gabriel's Delight was named after the guy who fell in the
Yes.
Yes.
the hot springs.
Yes.
Let's go.
Now, people, I typically don't like bananas, but this one is so good. All natural, so good. I think I'm going to just try a little bit of the Gabriel's Delight.
Okay.
And we have and we have pineapples in there. How could I not try that? And it's just one banana. And we have passion fruit in there as well. You should have one named the Passionate Delight.
You like
Just
the,
for
the
you.
rhythm of
Yeah,
love,
just for
right?
me, yeah.
The rhythm of love.
Yeah, a Passionate Delight.
lady, yeah.
So when I come visit you guys down in Soufriere, you'll create one just for me called Passionate Delight. Now the people off off camera, they're
Michael's
jealous.
Michael is
They're jealous. They want. You guys will get some later.
No calls yet?
Calls? I'll call the dropping. We have a caller online?
Hello.
Yes, hello.
Good night.
Hi.
Good night.
Good night.
Yes.
I just want to say hi to Krishna. I'm watching her. Hi to Krishna from Jeff and family. We are watching you. We are so proud of you, baby.
Oh, thank you very much.
How does that one taste?
Krishna.
Hi.
This is different. This citrus is by far my favorite because of the banana in there, but this is delicious. And if I can tell you this is delicious and I don't drink bananas, this is good. This is really, really good. Jazz, what's yours?
Yeah, chunk mine. It was so good. Oh, you what? You what?
This is really good.
Okay, thank you.
And the banana flavor is not very overwhelming,
No, it's
so I
not.
could deal with that.
Yes.
Appropriate for the morning, you know. You get up,
Absolutely.
you get a little.
Yeah,
nourishment
after you
that,
come from your
it's
walk or maybe even
very good.
before.
Yes, yes. Michael,
Yeah.
after your walk every morning, smoothie time.
But you digital now, so.
Yeah, man, I could go for a walk. No, this is
That's
really
before
good.
meals.
You know, Giants, you know what is missing in here?
Yeah.
Just one, maybe teaspoon
Of
of wildflower honey. Wildflower honey. That's what's missing in there. One. So maybe instead of grenadine, maybe we could put honey in there. So
Okay.
think about it when you're doing my passionate delight. Yeah, I'm gonna come now. I'm gonna let you guys know when I'm coming so I can get my passionate delight with wildflower honey.
Okay.
Not any honey, wildflower honey. And Jess can tell you all about wildflower honey and why. It's one of his projects. Do we have any calls coming through, Junior? Okay, so lady, these were two of your signature smoothies. We have a call? Okay. Hello, you're on the air?
Hi.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, well, I was just going to say hi to Giles and continue doing the good work and inspire the youth to creating their own employment.
thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Thank you so much. And Jazz, this is, you know, and it's funny. I need to tell St. Lucia I do not work with Jeff. So every month when Giles comes through, I get people calling me and saying, you know, the Jeff project and what
It's
is
a
it?
program, by the way.
Yeah,
It's a program.
and he always reminds me that it's a program and not a project.
Yes.
Project stipulates that it has a timeline.
Yes, time.
And the program, it's continuing. And just give us a little bit, just we're running out of time, just a snippet on Jeff and the program and what exactly you do, and who can call you and benefit from Jeff.
Excellent. Thank you for the opportunity. We are a global program in 125 countries all around the world, and we are working in small island developing states and developing countries. We are a GEF program implemented by UNDP, United Nations Development Program, and on behalf of what we call the GEF Partnership. The GEF Partnership includes the World Bank, UNEP, FAO, Asian Development Bank, European Development Bank, and so on. And what we are trying to do is to reduce negative environmental impacts around the world. So environmental sustainability is one of our objectives, but also reducing poverty by creating new income streams, employment opportunities, and developing capacity. So you might see our three objectives are environmental sustainability, poverty reduction, and capacity development. And we operate in what we call GEF focal areas. So everything from biodiversity conservation to alternative energy, to building resilience in the advent of climate change, to international waters, reducing pollution, to land degradation, reducing pollution of soils, to chemicals, reducing dangerous carcinogens in our environment. All of these things are important to us. And we support the international conventions associated with those international problems that I spoke of. So yeah, we are in St. Lucia. We came to St. Lucia in 2012 as a separate country program, and I believe we intend to stay long before I leave, or after I leave rather. This program will continue. We are in our 26th year of operation, and we are ready gearing for GEF 7, which starts at 1st of July next year.
And we can see the diversity of the projects that you implement and that you engage the program in, and it's fantastic.
But let me lament though we have about 84 projects in St. Lucia now, and since 10 October 2012, $14.2 million worth of investment, we still have significant amount of investment to do in St. Lucia. And the pace and the speed at which the funds are being absorbed is worrying to us. We want to speed it up, and that's why we're doing this program with you, to get people excited, to come up with ideas that have a benign impact on the environment, but create employment opportunities, reduce environmental impacts, build capacity over time, give people a pride in their ideas, discover the genius of our people in St. Lucia.
And speaking of genius, I mean, we did recently, just about 2 weeks ago, did export our very first innovation. We cannot escape that. We have to keep ringing that bell, because I think it's one of the things that will encourage people, especially young people, to take advantage of what GEF is offering, and to just have the ideas come out.
Soft partnership is one of the things for us, and that's why when the opportunity came from the request came from Nauru for our UN office in New York, and came down to me in St. Lucia, and we passed it on to Carlos, and you know what has happened.
Yes, the rest is history.
And we expect greater things.
Absolutely.
And hopefully when we have the knowledge fair in December, St. Lucians will get to see a lot more innovations like this.
And the thing about it, I'm sure if Carlos were here, he would tell you that he's been getting a lot of requests, a lot of inquiries. People just want to know more. They want to interview him from all over the region and extra-regional, and just asking a lot more about how they can access his innovation. We need to do a comeback, but we're all out of time. Quickly,
but I need to make that point. In fact, the innovations we've seen among young people, we have recommended to the Ministry of Sustainable Development to declare a decade of research and innovation in St. Lucia. Let us begin to rediscover and discover the possibilities that are out here in rural St. Lucia and so on, and bring it to the table and go beyond just primary production to tertiary level production and so on. And we think we cannot get stuck in neutral like we did in the
Absolutely
banana days.
not.
We have to go beyond that now.
Absolutely
and
not.
That is the possibility. And the last point I want to make, for the first time since I started working in the environment in the 1980s, SUFRE has dedicated organizations and programs and projects, the GIZ, the CATS program, Michael Bob at the SMME, Nadia, Arifa, and other projects we have in Fongelib and so on. We have a significant amount of resources dedicated to SUFRE to reduce negative environmental impacts and create the positive aspects that can give us development that is sustainable over time, and helping to build the capacity of young ladies like that over time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jazz, for coming through again. And yet another interesting project. We were all out of time. So this is where we end for tonight, but rest assured, we will be back next month with yet another GEF program. C'est tout. Au revoir. Bye-bye.